This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You also want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Don't download that Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. And finally, eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off and use code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. All right, Greg, the Patriots have returned to work, at least most of them from what we know. The Patriots returned yesterday to Gillette Stadium for their offseason workouts. First question, I think it's an easy one, but how important is this phase for Mike Vrabel and company?
I would say for Mike Vrabel and the coaches, I wouldn't say this phase, and I think it lasts, a couple of weeks. This is just they're able to do some on-field things with no coaches, like all that stuff. I don't think it's overly important for like Mike Vrabel and the coaches. As far as the players, yeah, I think it's important because they've turned over so much on this roster, Nick, that just getting guys, and we know from the videos and the pictures and we know like Drake May's there and Stephon Diggs and like a lot of the new guys. Christian Barmore is back working out, which is a great sign. I think it's just huge from a team building perspective that these guys are around each other, get to know each other, especially, Drake and, Mac Hollins and Stephon Diggs, some of the new offensive linemen getting together, probably meeting amongst themselves, but also just hanging out, maybe grabbing a meal. Like all of that stuff is important. And it's just, funny to note that, I guess telling some sort of, remember at this time last year. So what basically happens is teams with new head coaches have a two-week head start on everybody else. So they can come in 2 weeks earlier than teams with returning coaches.
Right.
Last year at this time, Gerard Mayo elected not to use the first week, to just use the second week because the coaches had to get on the same page before they got in front of the players, which I don't necessarily agree with because I don't think there's a whole lot that the coaches can do, but it just shows you the difference between where that staff was and where this staff is, and this staff is on top of it.
It's the first impression, right? It's the first impression that this coaching staff is going to have for all of the guys in the locker room, the guys that showed up. It's the beginning of the position groups building some kind of cohesion, camaraderie, and it's a chance for Vrabel and McDaniels and, Terrell Williams, for those guys to get to the front of the room and address their message for the first time. And Greg, I think it's important when you talk about the communication, because we know not to throw dirt on Gerard Mayo, okay, but we have to compare it to what happened last season because that's the way this thing works. And we had a lot of communication cracks in the system last year. And so whenever you can get together with everybody and start spelling things out to get on the same page, I think it's crucial after last season and after back-to-back 4-win seasons, and even in 2023. I mean, you wrote about it, the fracture within the coaching staff and how, not everybody loved each other in 2023. So just kind of the basics, the shaking of the hands, like you said, having something to eat, everybody kind of getting on the same page. The coaches obviously have been there for weeks, for a couple months. They've been working together, but it's always good to get people in the same room. You mentioned Christian Barmore. Saw pictures of him working out. I think you and I are of the same brain here. We don't want to leap to too many conclusions with Barmore given his health situation, but it certainly seems, Greg, that this is another step in the right direction. And I wanted to ask you, what would a full offseason mean for Christian Barmore, and what would a full offseason with him not having any hiccups, fingers crossed, mean for this defense and defensive line?
Oh, I think it'd be huge, Nick. I mean, we've seen Christian, how impactful he can be, and just the thought of pairing him and Milton Williams together in the middle of this defensive line is just I know it gets me really excited to watch, because I think they're going to be very formidable. And then you talk about Keon White and Harold Landry and Chase on, and Jennings and these guys, like, it'd be great. I do think it's a great sign. And we heard from Vrabel at the league meetings that he was under the impression that Barmore was going to be there for the start of voluntary workouts, and that Christian followed through. I think, having been around Christian a little bit the past couple of years, he is very team focused. He thinks that he's the type of guy, like last season, between his health issues and also, sort of slowly coming back. I bet you, especially after getting the contract, I bet you Christian was, really disappointed, that he probably feels like he let his teammates down. He let the team down, even though that's not really the truth, but he cares that much about what he does for the team that I bet that he's been itching to go this offseason, and being back on the first day, shows a lot that I would guess when we talk to him next and we hear him talk about that, basically he has a chip on his shoulder that he wants to make up for last year to the team, his teammates, and hit the ground running. And I do think this was a really good sign.
I just think about the potential of having both Williams and Barmore on the interior, and how much those guys are going to disrupt the rhythm of an offense, bother a quarterback by attacking the middle of the line of scrimmage, and how they're going to open up some opportunities for the guys on the edges. I mean, if you could get Barmore, even if he's at 80% this year, if you could get 80% Barmore and Milton Williams, and then, like you mentioned, you got Keon White in the mix, it's absolutely a defensive line that could wreak havoc on most teams, if not all teams in the NFL. And we know that Vrabel and Williams are going to be more aggressive, and they love violence and physicality. So I think it could be a fun brand of defense to watch, and I think fans should be excited. All right, we talked about the impact, the good side of what's happening this week, and taking the right steps. What about guys that miss, right? If you missed this week, how could that impact the player? Do you think that would be significant to Vrabel, and he would write that down in the book? He's got the notepad, and he's like, all right, so player X not here this week. How much of an impact would that have on the player's future?
So, I don't want to overblow it, because, as Mike Vrabel's stressed several times, these are voluntary workouts. But, from talking to people who have been around Vrabel, who covered Vrabel, who worked with Vrabel, and sort of, his attitude in Tennessee towards certain things, I do think that players have to be on the lookout that they could end up in his doghouse. Now, I'm not saying specifically from voluntary workouts. Like, I don't think it's going to be a major check mark. I think that them not being here, now it depends on the excuse. Some people might have a valid excuse, like they're getting married or the birth of a kid, who knows?
Right.
And let's just say, because I looked it up. So, and we don't know if this was accurate, but the Patriots put out a video yesterday of like they had to toss balls into what basket for the NCAA championship, who they thought was going to win. Their total was 53. From what I can tell, there are 69 signed players on the roster right now. So that's and that might not be accurate. Let's say there were some early birds. Let's say there's probably like a handful of guys who missed the first day, or maybe they're coming in the second day, because, just to let people know. So this is phase one. It's 2 weeks. It's 4 hours a day that they can be there. Limited to strength and conditioning activities, dead ball, only strength and conditioning coaches allowed on the field, 90-minute max on the field. Clubs can only specify 2 hours for players to be at the facility. Players choose the other 2 hours for weights, etc. So there's no like mandatory, like it doesn't say whether the coaches can meet with them or not. Let's just say that if the handful of guys that don't show up, that maybe don't have a valid excuse, I would say that there's a little check mark there for Vrabel, just to be like, okay. And, we'll see when they get there and, how they look. And then it could develop into a bigger check mark against them. But I do think, like I said, from talking to people, players need to do the right things. And we've seen already, like, how much they care about the culture and people fitting and that's going to trump everything and fitting into the team program. That if they don't do that, and that includes doing, all the work necessary, then you could end up in Mike Vrabel's doghouse.
It's all about the culture. It's all about the program and establishing things the right way. By the way, Marcus Jones did say during his meeting with the media today that the new defensive install started today. So I have to imagine that players are talking to coaches about install and going over things. So I would imagine that is the case. All right. Couple of visits. I don't know if you've done a lot of work on these guys just yet. The draft is 2 weeks from Thursday, but we have a couple of visits that have been reported, guys visiting top 30 with the Patriots. And we'll always say this. I'll cut Greg off at the pass here. Top 30 visits are not the end-all, be-all. A lot of times you bring in guys to get background on dudes, and, it doesn't necessarily mean that the team is super interested in the guy and that they're absolutely going to draft the guy, okay? That doesn't mean that. But let's start with wide receiver, Greg. Iowa State wide receiver Jaylin Noel apparently in town to meet with the Patriots. Your thoughts, if you have any, on Jaylin Noel, but overall, really wide receiver position after signing Stephon Diggs. Where do you think they're at as far as this draft goes?
I think they are definitely interested in drafting a receiver at some point. I like both Iowa State kids. The other guy, his name escapes me right now. But this is Jaylin Noel's a 5'10", 194 type guy. Tested out of the roof as far as athleticism, score 4.39 type of guy. Great 3-cone, 6.82, 23 on the bench press. I think he can return as well. He's sort of a do everything type of guy. I think he's a good prospect. I would say that he's more of a day 2 pick. I don't know if he has any medical that they needed to check out. That's also something that they do on these 30 visits. Some of it's character, some of it's injury, some of it's, get to know guys. Because remember, these teams can do like Zooms up the wazoo with these guys. So to bring them in, they're looking for something. But, definitely a good prospect, sort of like a day 2 type of guy.
The other receiver you're thinking about is Jayden Higgins, who is more of the X receiver type, 6'4", 215, 220. He also went to Iowa State. He previously played for the Eastern Kentucky Colonels, if you're wondering. All right, another guy that is visiting the Patriots. And this dude's polarizing, Greg. This guy's polarizing. Shemar Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M. Of course, the Patriots have Landry. They've got Chase on. But Landry's a little long in the tooth. Chaseon's a 1-year deal. What do you make of Shemar Stewart visiting?
So Shemar Stewart's very interesting. He was at the Senior Bowl, and he was one of the best players on the field. He was great. Like I've said before, I don't watch a whole lot of college football during the season. I don't have much time for it. But Shemar Stewart, the dude is a man. He's, 6'5", 270 at the combine, ran a 4.58. He's the type of guy, I think, Rick Saratella, our draft guy at BSJ, he actually, if I remember correctly, he had Shemar Stewart as a defensive lineman, that he thinks he can add more weight and be like a 265, like 285 type guy on the interior. He was 281 at the Senior Bowl. He was 270 at the combine. Scouts think he plays, more like he's 240. So you can go in a lot of different directions with him. I will say he's one of these guys like, looks like Tarzan. I don't want to say he plays like Jane, but like he looks built for it. He just has like no production in college. I think he had like, he's got 30, his arms are over 34. His hands are 9 5/8. He's a freak show, but I think he had like finished with, let's see, his career, 65 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 4 passes defense in 37 games and 19 starts. 4.5 sacks. Everybody wonders, you see it, you see the intangibles. That's probably, if I were the Patriots, I would bring him in to be like, how come he didn't produce more? He would be a guy that I would want to talk to because he looks the part. He just doesn't produce like the part.
What's amazing is he's stunningly consistent. He had a sack and a half in his first year, sack and a half in his second year, sack and a half last year. So it's not like 4.5 sacks where he just took the first 2 years and just completely missed on them. No, it's a sack and a half, sack and a half, sack and a half. So you knew exactly what you were getting from him, I guess you could say, from a sack perspective. There are people who will point out that Stewart is good when it comes to quote unquote disruptions, which is a stat that's kept now. Pressures and disruptions. So he gets into the backfield maybe at a higher clip than it looks like, but the sack total, for whatever reason, is just not there. And the thing about Stewart is he is outrageously athletic. He is just, if anybody out there pays attention to the relative athletic score, the RAS, which is, you put all these composite grades together. You look at vertical and broad, and it's the explosion grade. And you look at the 40-yard dash, 20 and 10-yard splits. That's the speed grade. And so Shemar Stewart's RAS from 0 to 10 is 10. It's 10, folks. And he ran a 4.59 40. He had a 40-inch vert. I mean, this guy is just – he was ranked number 1 out of 2012 defensive ends from 1987 to 2025. The top guy. So at defensive end, this is literally the most athletic defensive end that we have ever seen as far as going back to 1987. So just an athletic freak. And like Greg said, he's one of those dudes that, he walks off the bus. You probably know what he does for a living. But then you look at the production and you wonder what's going on with that. All right, we have a lot more here, but first, Greg wants to talk about PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Love sitting down for a game, just like I did last night with the NCAA. That was an interesting game. And get my selections in root form. It's a blast. The app is fast. It's easy to use. You should check it out. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The app is really easily used to create a lineup. All you do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. They have all the sports. Baseball's heating up. The Sox were hot. Then they got cooled off last night. Basketball, of course, hockey, esports, and much more. The second half of the basketball season is here, and the race to the playoffs is heating up on PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
He just brought up basketball. I'm trying not to be distracted, but Michael Malone was just fired by Denver, which is just amazing.
Really?
Guy won a championship like what, 3 years ago, 3 years ago?
Seriously.
And it's just crazy. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. 47-32. They're 4th place in the Western Conference, less than a week away from the playoffs.
Wow.
Insane. And by the way, yes, the NCAA tournament national championship game last night. I know you tweeted about it. I tweeted about it. That officiating crew, man, you call 4 total fouls in the first half, and then you call like 35 in the second.
I mean, it was ridiculous. I could see like the way the Florida coach adjusted at halftime. First of all, I think Florida was called for 1 foul in the first half. And then all of a sudden, you go into halftime and you're like, all right, well, they're letting us play. We need to be more physical. And then all of a sudden they call 5 fouls in like a row in like 90 seconds on Florida. And then they were like, oh man, maybe we should even this up because they're in the bonus. Houston's in the bonus with like 16 minutes left in the second half. And then all of a sudden they call Houston for like 4 or 5 fouls in a row. Like, holy mackerel, man.
There was one time, I think they called literally 3 fouls on Houston in 9 seconds. Like, what are we doing? The first half was great. It was glorious.
Yeah.
It was like 40 minutes long in real time. I was like, thank God. I shout out to the refs. I tweeted, first half, 4 combined fouls. Way to not get in the way. Let them play. And then in the second half, it was the complete opposite. I will say, though, before we get back to football, This is not even a humble brag. It's a brag, baby. So Beasley had their brackets, Beasley /98.5. I won the brackets last night with Florida winning first place. Not only that, Bedard, I got first and second place. Suck on that.
How about you?
look at this guy, huh?
Wow.
Shout out to Alex Barth, by the way, who finished in third place. But yeah, first and second place. Maz got fifth.
I didn't get a bracket.
I don't know. They wanted to keep you out. All right, let's get back to football. Let's look at some mock drafts. It's mock draft season, and there's like 1,000 of them that were released this week, the first couple days. Let's start with your boy, Mike Giardi. He has Jaylen Walker at number 4. And then he has the Patriots trading up into this first round to draft Josh Connerly, going from the second round to the first round. Now, a part of this Giardi thing, Greg, his mock draft, he wrote how, Jaylen Walker has a lot of fans at Gillette Stadium.
Yeah.
What are you hearing about Jaylen Walker, and how do you feel about Giardi's mock?
Yeah, I mean, look, about Jaylen Walker, I love Jaylen Walker. And, and he's totally, from a football character standpoint, he is totally a Vrabel guy.
Let me jump in here. 1 second. I just want to ask you this quick. Off-ball linebacker or end or edge? Where do you see him?
Good question. I haven't dug in enough on him, but I see him right now. I see him as an edge first.
Okay.
And, maybe try some other things. But the people at Georgia absolutely rave about him. He's quick twitch, big time motor. He is a tweener. I mean, he's only 6'1", 243. So, what do you do with him? He's got kind of short arms. He's similar to, Nolan Smith, his former teammate who went to the Eagles, 30th overall in 2023. He's not as speedy as Nolan Smith, but he plays heavier and bigger. I love him. I mean, you can line him up all over the place. So if that happens, he's in the group of players that I would be like, if the Patriots picked him at 4, I'd be like, okay. I mean, I see it. He's good enough to take at that spot. And I do like the idea, which we've talked about a few times here, going sort of best player available at 4. If, Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter isn't available at 4, which is looking more and more like that's going to be the case, then taking the best player that you can, really regardless of position, and then trading back up in the first round to get your tackle. Like you have to come out of, either from 4 to 38 if you stick there. I'd rather not stick there and chance what happened last year where you got caught with your pants down. You're basically behind.
Hey now.
Because these tackles are going to – because these guys are going to get overdrafted, by about a half a round probably. I would rather them trade up, and I'm certainly a proponent of that. You have to get an offensive tackle within the first 38 picks of this draft. And if it doesn't happen at 4, you've got to find a place. Now, Connerly, I'm not crazy about. I'm not done completely with, looking at the left tackles. At least he has done it in college. I think he's a little bit undersized. I don't love him. I don't love Oregon players for some reason, especially on the offensive line. It's just some bug that I have. But the idea of doing that, I would prefer like a Kelvin Banks. Maybe you can get Ursery at some point. I think those guys, to me, stand a better chance of playing left tackle in the league. But the sentiment of doing that, taking Jaylen Walker and then trading up for a tackle, yes, I'm on board with that.
Your schedule is pretty open nowadays, right, Greg?
Somewhat, yeah. Especially now that the league meetings are over.
All right, so I want you to – I don't know if you'll have the time, but I want you to watch a podcast that came out recently. It's I don't know if you know Nate Tice.
Oh, yeah, I saw you tweet about that. That was interesting. Yeah. I definitely wanted to do that. And
so if anybody wants to learn about the offensive line prospects, and they do it, they run through 11 of them, and it's Nate Tice, who's at, I believe, Yahoo, who has his own podcast. It's Football 301, if you want to look it up. And he has his dad on, who's obviously Mike Tice, former offensive line coach, head coach of the NFL, blah, blah. And
Meathead.
And Meathead. And they run through 11 of the top offensive line prospects. And Tice actually has Connerly as his number one guy. So
Really?
take that for what it's worth. Chad Reuter, let's go with Reuter from NFL.com. He has Abdul Carter at number 4. Now, will Carter fall to 4? Unlikely. But I wanted to ask you about this mock draft, Greg, because your buddy Bob McGinn is doing all of his work on these prospects, and he's been doing this for a long time. He talks to a bunch of scouts. And McGinn unearthed some baggage on one Abdul Carter. And he brought up the fact that there are not one, but four personnel people that he spoke with questioned Carter's work ethic, his desire. Would you still pick him at 4 if he was there? And how do you feel about the baggage stuff?
Am I wrong to say the Patriots brought him in? I thought I saw that, or are bringing him in.
I think he had plans of going to the top 4 teams, visiting the top 4 teams. I think that came out a week or two ago.
Yeah. So, and we've discussed this before, I think, because I heard at the Senior Bowl from people that, and I warned that there were going to be some character questions on Abdul Carter coming out. And
by the way, just to cut you off for a second, your buddy Bert did previously report that Carter had a visit with the Pats scheduled. So there you go.
Yeah. And so if I'm the Pats, I'm checking on his character because, there's some entitlement stuff. There's also, look, and I'm not saying this takes him off the board for you, or it's that, all that important. Maybe you want this in a player, but, he had the reputation for being kind of an a-hole at Penn State and, to a lot of people. And I hope this doesn't get, aggregated, but whatever.
It's going to.
No, but I mean, I don't know if you, people, 4 personnel people, not a great worker. Was there anything? He's a modern, high maintenance, big time player. Micah was probably there are similarities to Micah Parsons as a player and a kid. Micah was probably a little bit more malicious coming out. Does that mean that Micah Parsons was
on the field? That's how I read it. But here's here's some of the really good stuff from McGinn. He's just what you want up there. Fourth Scout said, Pro Bowler. He's got everything you're looking for as an edge rusher, but he's not a quality guy. McGinn wrote that Scout was one of 4 personnel people to express reservations about Carter's makeup. Another one said, quote, he's not a great worker. Plays his butt off on Saturday, but he's not a great guy during the week because he's so gifted. And there's a little baggage. A 5th Scout said there's a little baggage that comes with him. Some people just shrug their shoulders and say it comes with the territory. Other people were a little more concerned with it. So
that's the stuff that the Patriots, on a 30 visit, they have to get to the root to or the root of, and they need to, have scouts who have good contacts at Penn State. And, like I said, I was hearing this stuff about Carter at the Senior Bowl. It was going around and, now it's coming out. I can't say whether that would preclude me from taking him. Certainly, I mean, it's going to be a tough evaluation. Like, you look at Abdul Carter and you look at Jaylen Walker and, how much different are they as players? They're kind of similar in that they can play edge. They can play off-ball linebacker and all stuff. On one hand, you have a guy with questionable intangibles and work ethic. Is that going to fly with Mike Vrabel? Do they think that's the truth? Whereas in Jaylen Walker, he's pristine across the board with everything. How do you balance that? It'll be interesting to see how the Patriots do that. I mean, as we know, Nick, from, last year, and, we'll get into this a little bit more with like Joe Milton, but last year with Elliott Wolf in charge, I wrote a column after the draft, pointing out red flags on almost all the draft picks that the Patriots took last year. Like, it was way more than they ever did under Bill in one draft, and it kind of bit them in the rear end. Mike Vrabel's in charge. We know that. We know that they're not putting up with any of that stuff. They got rid of Joe Milton. Who knows who else they're going to get rid of? So it's going to be interesting. I think that this group is going to value, especially in year one of, laying this foundation. They're going to side on, we want to build this thing the right way with the right people. We don't care if it takes us a little bit longer. We're going to do it the right way. And so how they balance guys like this between, Carter and Walker is going to be fascinating to watch.
It is, and it's critical. All right, I've got one more mock draft that I want to get to for us with not one but two trades in this mock draft. We'll get to that. Also, where is Bedard leaning currently? What would he do at number 4 if the draft was tonight? We'll get to those two things, but first, Greg will tell you about Game Time.
Yeah, you got to check out Game Time. You got to get into the arena for basketball, hockey, whatever. I was just looking. I think the Bruins are home on Thursday night. You can get in for because they kind of stink, but at least you can go, and it's not going to cost you $250. It normally does. You can get in for $60, $70, $80 at a Bruins game through Game Time. I was just checking it out. I was looking at the Game Time picks, which the curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. They have all sorts of tickets on there. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. They get panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, which is a must for me. I love how it's right there in the app, and I don't have to go on another, on my computer and go to a different site. It's right there. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 100 to 10% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
All right, let's talk about Phil Perry. Very nice man, does good work, has a mock draft out there. Not one, but two trades from Phil. The first one is trading from 4 down to 9 with the New Orleans Saints, and Phil drafts Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. Would you be okay with that move, Greg?
Yes. I would be. I will say I'm not sure which mock this is for Phil and what he's trying to do, because Phil does 8 billion mock drafts. Credit to him. Yeah. And each of them is different, like trades or no trades or all trades or I don't know. So I don't know what his aim was with this. Look, Tyler Warren is on the list, the short list for me of players they could draft it for, where I'm going to be like, okay, I get it. And I'm not going to really complain a lot. That would be, this is if Carter and Hunter are gone, it would be Will Campbell, Ashton Genty, Tyler Warren, Jaylen Walker, and I think there's one more. But those are the guys that if the Patriots took them, I could be like, I see a path. I see why. And Warren is definitely on the list because I think he's the best all-around tight end prospect that we've seen in a long time. I think he's terrific. I think, Hunter Henry isn't getting any younger. Austin Hooper is just sort of a, functional F tight end. But Tyler Warren can be the future and sort of pair him up with Jesus Christ.
Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper,
but Drake May. I just lost Drake May's name. But you pair him up. I love the idea of getting a guy this year to pair up with Drake May for the rest of his career, and Tyler Warren is one of those guys. And yeah.
You like him better than Colston Loveland, obviously?
I do, because I think that Warren is more of a willing blocker, can be more of the prototypical Y tight end in Josh McDaniels' offense, where Loveland is more of a receiver to me, slot receiver, more like Travis Kelce type. And I don't know how much, certainly if he would be productive and he would fit here, I just don't think it's the ideal fit.
He'll be 23 in May. Does that impact the evaluation at all?
Warren is?
Yeah.
No, it does not.
Okay. Phil Perry wasn't done. Phil kept trading. He traded back into the first round and drafted a tackle. much like Giardi did, but this time it's not Josh Connerly, it's Josh Simmons. Do you like Simmons, Greg?
I do. I mean, look, there's obviously the medical involved with him. It's like a patellar tendon thing, which is oftentimes tougher, than say an ACL or something like that. Big dude, 33.5-inch arms, hands are 10 3/8. He's good. I think, some people think he's a little bit overrated. He has some athleticism. He's not a great athlete. I wouldn't say he's the same athlete as like, Membu or Banks or even, Connerly type of guy. But I mean, there's a lot to look into on Justin Simmons. They would have to do a lot of background work on him.
And the good news, obviously, is Vrabel from Ohio State, coached at Ohio State, has a number of friends at Ohio State. So if you want to get intel on Simmons, it would stand to reason that Vrabel could get a lot of good intel from Ryan Day and company out there. And we saw, take it for what it's worth, it was at like a pro day, but we did see the video of Vrabel spending a lot of time with Simmons when he was at Ohio State during the pro day, talking to him a lot off to the side. So again, take that for what it's worth.
Nick, one thing, from Bob McGinn stuff about Simmons, this is from, this says a 4 Scout, kind of stuff is bleeped out, but I think it's kind of an F up. His issues are more football character. He has a complete bullshit sense of urgency, like a total finesse player. Mental is an issue, lacks power, struggles to anchor. Fundamentals are poor, plays like a guy that was at JUCO and just came here. So wonderful. This guy loves Josh Simmons.
I say that Scout's a big fan. All right. We've gone through some of the mocks. Greg Bedard is Mike Vrabel's sick. He's got the poops. He's not going to make it. He can't get to a phone for some reason. Something's gone wrong, right? So Greg Bedard parachutes into the war room, draft room, whatever we call it nowadays. We're recording this on April 8th, of course. But if Bedard is sitting in that room right now, if you can't get Hunter, you can't get Carter, you can't trade down, what are you doing? How are you leaning right now?
The New York. What the hell's wrong with me?
New York.
One of these days, New York. The New England Patriots select offensive tackle from LSU, Will Campbell.
Oh.
I will say this, a couple different reasons. I've come around on him a little bit. I do think what we've talked about before. I do think he's going to you can plug him into left tackle this year, and he's going to be an upgrade, and you're going to be functional, and you're going to be fine. And maybe it turns out not to be his long-term position. Like say Brandon Coleman last year with Washington, who was a 3rd round pick, started, but now they're moving him inside. They signed an offensive tackle, and look, they went to the NFC Championship game, with that setup. I think that he definitely upgrades left tackle for you. We know the glaring hole that is there at left tackle for this team. At worst, you have a all-pro guard type in the anchor of your offensive line room for a decade. So there's no bust factor. He's going to be a very good NFL player. The more people I talk to, the more they think he can play tackle. And I will say there was one personnel guy that I was talking to last night who, and I respect him a great deal. And I know his history over the years of identifying people. And so, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't put much stock into it. I think he's really good, especially with offensive linemen. And he loves Will Campbell and says he will play tackle for 10 years in this league. And that's sort of right now, as of today, I'm okay with Will Campbell being the 4th overall pick and like plug that hole and let's freaking go.
A lot of smart people that, I follow and that I trust. They think he's a tackle. Daniel Jeremiah has been pretty bullish on that idea. He said the same thing. He could see him playing tackle for a decade, if not longer. I know Field Yates believes he's a tackle, and there are plenty of other people who believe he's a tackle. I want to ask you this question. Ashton Genty. Any chance you would draft Genty at 4?
I would. I mean, it all depends on their evaluation. If their evaluation is this guy is instant impact, possible all pro, like very early in his career, possible Hall of Famer, like top of the evaluation, which, I just think his balance and, game breaking ability, the ability to make people miss. I see elite talent. I do worry a little bit about his workload, the mileage on him. He got a lot of mileage in college.
Yep.
So you worry about when that's going to, I mean, look at Saquon Barkley, what happened to him. He had the ACL, all that stuff. So definitely something to worry about. But if the Patriots evaluate and they say, we had him rated as the top player in the draft, which I know some people have that, and they said we just couldn't pass on him, then I would be okay with it.
All right, we got one more segment to go, but first, Factor Meals.
Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved, ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto Meals based on a randomized, controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, which is what I get. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. I got to tell you, I love Factor meals. They arrive, you pop them into the microwave for 2 to 3 minutes, and these things are ready to go, piping hot. And I got to tell you, the flavor is off the charts. If you've ever had some dietary stuff or like even the stuff in the supermarket, forget this. This is like real ingredients. The seasoning is off the charts. I've never had a bland Factor meal. It's absolutely spectacular. You should try it and do it through this offer. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off and use code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Bedard50 off at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off to get $50 off plus free shipping on your first box. That's a great deal. Make sure you check it out.
All right. Don't just check out Factor. Check out BSJ, $50 for the year. Bedard Giardi doing great work. All the draft preparation going on there. Captain Rick also doing a lot of the draft stuff. You also want to download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. And also take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's wrap things up today with a little Joe Milton talk. We have not talked about Milton yet on this specific podcast. Your thoughts, Greg, on the return the Patriots got from Milton?
I was surprised at the return. I thought, at least like a 5th total. I mean, basically they got a 5th and had to give up a 7th. So it's basically a 6th. I was surprised by that. To me, that tells me that the evaluations, and look, the Patriots drafted him in the 6th round. So obviously the evaluations on Joe Milton coming out were not that high despite his talent. To me, that tells me, and he was part of my red flag column last year about maturity issues, that teams, didn't love the makeup of Joe Milton. And even, one game where he was spectacular in that game and showed everything that you want. That didn't even change them, all that much. But the bottom line is, the Patriots, from what I understand, and there's been other people have reported some stuff, but I've been talking to people for a while. They didn't want him in the building anymore. They did not like his makeup. What Karen reported the other day is absolutely true, that he thought he should get a chance to compete. He thought that, at times he was better than Drake May. That's not what they want. And that's not what they want in their quarterback move. It's Drake May's show. They want people to know their place. You know, Jacoby Brissett didn't know his place last year, or, you know, he didn't like being demoted. You know, now they brought in a guy in Josh Dobbs who knows exactly what his role is, and is very smart and is going to pick up the offense and be ready to go as a veteran presence. I'm sure they're going to bring in, you know, whether it's in the draft if they find somebody they like, or undrafted free agency or what have you, they're going to bring in at least a third arm, if not a fourth arm. And that third player who could end up sticking is going to know his role, that he, you know, it's Drake May's show and you're there to support the quarterback. And I don't have a problem with that at all. Again, this is all Mike Vrabel is starting his program. If there's anybody that they think is going to run counter or could possibly create issues within the locker room, within the quarterback room, especially, I'm not dealing with that either. Like, I'll just, you know, move on, find the next guy. And so I didn't have a problem with any of it. From what I hear, their reasonings are legit. They didn't like him behind the scenes, so he had to go, just like other people.
It's the old risk reward, you know, proposition here of, all right, if you hold on to him, what does that do to the quarterback room? If you hold on to him, what does that do to the overall culture of the team? I can't imagine that Joe Milton would have a huge impact on the entire team, but Vrabel's trying to set the standard. It's as simple as that. He doesn't want anybody turning into a malcontent or being unhappy. And so it's the risk versus the reward. And maybe if you hold on to Joe Milton, he sucks it up for one more year. May turns an ankle, misses a couple games. Milton goes bananas. Maybe you get a fourth. Maybe you get a compensatory third. And I think that the question is that's pertinent here. Is it worth taking that gamble to get a fourth-round pick, maybe a compensatory third? Is it worth the risk to hold on to Joe Milton and what that could create between he and Drake May and what it could do to the quarterback room? And it's rather obvious that Mike Vrabel said, no, it's not worth the risk. This guy is not that big of a deal. He's got raw talent, but he's 25. He played in college for 6 years. He was a sixth-round pick. And I don't want a pain in the ass if he's going to become a pain in the ass if this guy's not going to be a big-time difference maker. And, you know, comparing a compensatory fifth for a fourth or a compensatory third, the risk outweighed the reward, so it was time to move on. And I would imagine, Greg, that the timing of the move is what other people have said, which is, before I get to that, I did want to ask you, there's a bit of a source off, or there was a source off between two writers. Jordan Schultz came out and said that the Patriots had better offers for Milton. Burt came out and said, no, Dallas was the only offer on the table for Milton. Have you heard anything? Which side do you kind of look at here and say, I believe that one more than the other?
It was Dallas was the only offer at the end of the day. And so, I don't know if somebody was doing a favor for an agent trying to, you know, maybe up the rep of the player or what have you. But Dallas was the only offer at the end of the day.
Timing because of what's coming up, and you know, before obviously now it's here with the workout program starting yesterday. Is that why?
Yeah, I think they just they just wanted a fresh start for the team that they were going to move forward with. And look, I just want to say, like, even though I do think, you know, there were red flags on Joe Milton, which is part of the reason why he was available in the 6th round. And people question his maturity and other stuff. And, like, you know, I've had other people, you know, tell me, like, quote unquote, you know, not a good dude. And so, you know, they didn't want him around. But I will say, if Joe Milton thought highly of himself and wanted a chance to compete, you know, I don't blame him. You have to understand, this is a guy who I think he's either 25 or he's about to turn 25. And by the time, you know, say like the normal Packers thing where you keep him for 4 years and either you trade him or, you know, you get a compensatory pick because some team signs him big. I mean, you're talking about he's going to be like 28, 29 years old by the time that happens. So I understand there being a sense of urgency for him, but, you know, that the Patriots they're starting this foundation with a certain profile on guys, and not everybody's going to be a Boy Scout, But when it comes to the dynamics in the quarterback room, I think that is really important. And I don't think it says anything about Drake May, being too soft or what have you. Like, look, these guys, Rabel and Cowden and Stretch, they all know what they're doing. And Josh McDaniels, they all know what they're doing. They didn't want this guy here. There's a reason. I trust them. And to me, it's valid. And just time to move on and get another guy.
We've all been in relationships. Sometimes the timing just doesn't work, Greg. Sometimes she's ready for marriage and you're not. Sometimes you're ready for marriage and she's not. And Joe Milton, his starting quarterback clock was ticking in his head. And he felt like, hey, I can be better than Drake May. I can beat him out. And I don't fault Milton for that at all. Like, he should want that, he should have that fire and he should have the desire of being a starting quarterback and say, I believe I can be better than that guy. But if you're the Patriots, you drafted Drake May 3rd overall. He's your franchise quarterback. It's as simple as that. And so it's a relationship where one side wants it one way, the other side wants it another way. And they decided to split up. They decided to call it quits. And the Patriots tapped out. One last one for you. Quarterback 3 now. What do? Do you draft somebody in that? So you got 2 5ths, you got 2 7ths, undrafted free agent. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of how the board falls. One interesting name to me, and I haven't studied him as much as you do, but I was kind of interested in your opinion. Considering his physical profile and the way he plays and his athletic ability, and I don't know how old he is, but, I wouldn't be opposed to like a Riley Leonard. What do you think about that? Like him learning from Josh McDaniels in the background and like, the way he's like a runner or how Drake May sort of runs. At first blush, it seems like that might be a good pairing and a guy to develop and see what happens. But I don't know what you think about it because you're the big Notre Dame fan.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been listening to my stuff. I don't know if you've been taking notes of my tweets, but yeah,
No.
that's the name I've brought up. I've brought it up now for the last even before the trade of Joe Milton. At the beginning of the offseason, I said if you want to look for a third quarterback, even if you kept Milton, this was before obviously signing Dobbs. I said, Riley Leonard makes a lot of sense, and I am a Notre Dame football fan, as many know. But I'll tell you, you hit the nail on the head as far as frame. The same kind of level of athleticism, the same kind of frame.
Mm-hmm.
He's 6'4". Same, I think, roughly the same weight as Drake coming out. He'll be,
I think, a little lighter, probably like 10, 15 pounds lighter.
Yeah, a little lighter. I would buy that. And he's going to be.
He's 22, so that's good. He turned 23 in September. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. He's 23 in September. And look, as far as like intangibles, as far as like a Mike Vrabel guy, he checks a lot of the boxes, as they say. He's a very good leader. He's got a great head on his shoulders, maturity beyond his age, super tough. If anybody saw the national championship game, that first drive should tell you that. I mean, just a super, super tough kid who ran the football a lot of design runs by Mike Denbrock from Notre Dame last year. He's willing to take a hit more than a few times in a game. He gets back up, doesn't complain. So yeah, I mean, I think he's tough. He's smart. He's got leadership qualities. I do think he's somebody that in that room would understand. I'm not a starting quarterback right now. I'm not being drafted to be that guy right now. And yeah, I mean, I really like the idea. I've been pumping.
What about this, Nick? What about this? Because you've seen him more than I have. He's the third quarterback, you develop him, but like it seems he's so athletic. Could he develop into like a Taysom Hill type of guy? Sort of, could do everything. Could play a little fullback. Could play a little tight end. Spread Drake May out. You bring in Riley Leonard. Like I think he has that potential too. In the meantime, while he's training and waiting for his chance, I think I could see that with a guy like him.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at athleticism, obviously it's different from the quarterback position to what you want to do tight end, and Hill's a different kind of guy. But I wouldn't be opposed to see if he'd be willing to do it. I would imagine he'd be willing to do it. And I think he could do some things, but of course, who knows? I don't know his hands. I don't know his route running. I don't know how that goes. From a running perspective, he could absolutely do it. From a running perspective, he could absolutely be a back in the backfield, somebody that can help in that regard. And look, I know people will say, oh, well, he can't throw the football great. He doesn't have a strong arm. Yeah, that's why he's going to go in like the 6th round. He's not going to go in the top 3 rounds. He's got flaws. He doesn't have a great arm. He's not an accurate guy, like beyond 15 to 20 yards. He has some issues. He did hit some passes, I would say, though, especially as the season grew on downfield, but that's not a strength of his. A lot of quick stuff, a lot of screen stuff, a lot of slant stuff. So yeah, he doesn't have a rocket arm, and he's not a pristine passer, and his footwork is a little sloppy and all that stuff. But again, 3rd quarterback, emergency guy, someone who gets it on and off the field, who fits the profile like May does athletically and size wise. Quarterback designed runs going to be part of this offense. I'd imagine with McDaniels, he can do that at an elite level. I mean, he was fantastic running the football. So yeah, I think he makes a lot of sense. All right. He's Greg. I'm Nick. We got to go. I've got lunch waiting, and we'll talk to you later in the week. Until next time, bye-bye.